Donnie and Dolly, the team is supported by ableauctions.ca. Closing your business? We can help.
It's Friday. All of today's guests, including Thomas Drance, who's standing by in Abbotsford, brought to you by Langley Chrysler. Don't struggle to find a great deal on new or used vehicles when Langley Chrysler has over 200 vehicles on the lot. Save up to $10,500 on Ram it. Langley Chrysler, in-store or online at langleychrysler.com. Thomas Drance is out in Abbotsford. You wanted to do this. You take it away.
Thomas Drance, coming up. Let's see a photo of Tom. How are you doing, Thomas?
I'm doing well. This is my first career on location. I'm going to sign it off with, for Check TV. This is Thomas.
Thomas,
so very excited.
Thomas, we found your twin brother.
Oh, did you? No.
Kojak, baby, Kojak.
Oh,
look at that. Look at that.
Let's do this.
I didn't know Kojak, the buttons.
I froze.
Look at the buttons on Kojak. Come on, man.
Lack of buttons.
Lack of buttons. Is that your twin brother? Fess up. Fess up.
I'm going to need to upgrade my shirt game to earn that comparison, Rick.
All right.
I'll tell you this, that back in the day, Telly Savalas was considered somewhat of a sex symbol.
He was.
Back in the day.
And look at him. Not Thomas, but this Telly Savalas guy looks...
Telly Savalas voiced over some characters in the Flintstones as well. All right, Thomas, scrimmage, it just wrapped up 3-0 for Team White over Team Blue. Goals for Team White. Gadjevich, Burrows, Pettersson, what was your takeaway?
Well, the team that had to practice first got shut out. So the fresh team won. Not a huge surprise. That's an annual tradition at Canucks training camp. And, yeah, there were some pretty interesting performances. I thought Nick Pettersson played really well in that top-line role. I thought Victor Persson showed pretty well as one of sort of the under-the-radar guys who's not really going to make the NHL team, but has a chance to make a first impression. He had some nice outlet passes, some decent moments. Gadjevich, the shift on which he scored, he started it off with this big hit on Jack Rathbone, and then, of course, he finished it. That was like a classic power forward shift. You'd have to think that caught the attention of a variety of Canucks coaches that were watching from the stands. And, yeah, I think a guy like Philip DiGiuseppe, for me, is beginning to separate himself. He was on the losing team, but when you see him win battles, when you see him skate through the neutral zone, when you see the combination of just NHL poise and size and speed, for me, he's beginning to look like a player that's going to be tough to dislodge from one of those vacant fourth-line forward spots.
Yeah, so Tyler Mott, if he's not there, and other absentees as well, he's not there. Possibility that DiGiuseppe could fill in there. What does he bring, Thomas? Is there offensive potential there? Grinder, what does he bring?
Well, there is. When you look at his career track record extrapolated over 82 games, right? He's averaged sort of 26-ish points per 82. If you have a fourth-line player that's contributing at that level, they're a really good fourth-line player, especially when you add into the equation the defensive solidity, the ability to win battles along the wall, the speed, the ability to PK. I do think that's going to be a tough mix. And so far, through the early part of training camp, I think he's made a really strong case. I think he's the type of fourth liner that would give them the speed that they just too often have lacked in the bottom six, aside from Tyler Mott.
Thomas, let's get into it. There's some big names not here at camp. Give us the latest on Pettersson and Hughes. What are you hearing?
Not much. It remains sort of, I think, a touch-and-go sort of negotiation. I think that they're really struggling to figure out how to get both guys. And the dynamic of the connection between the two, right? Repped by the same agency, both together in Michigan, and the fact that the Canucks have this finite pool of cap space means that if you move on one, that sort of impacts what you can do on the other, which I do think makes this more complicated to solve in terms of the two sides actually bridging what remains in terms of a gap. The other thing, though, to keep in mind, that's the downside of having them so connected. The upside of having them so connected is, and I've said this on the show a couple of times now, but Pettersson has to go first. And at least because they're both repped by the same people in Pettersson and JP Barry, that like avoids it being personal.
Can you do two things for us, Thomas? Give us a quick recap of where Pettersson and Hughes are contracts, and then get into Travis Hamonic. What is going on? Nobody knows what's going on with Travis Hamonic.
Yeah, so let's talk Petey and Hughes first. I don't know how much of my spiel you missed, but the fact of the matter is that there's a finite amount of cap space available, right? There's only like 15 to 16 million, and so there are some things that are off the table in terms of what the Canucks are able to do with these players. And because they're rep by the same firm and because these negotiations are going on concurrently, you know, if you move on one, right, if you move to a longer deal or you move to more money on one, that impacts what you can do with the other, right? And that's sort of one of the drawbacks, I think, that the Canucks are working through. The limited flexibility plus the fact that these negotiations are conjoined adds a complicating factor. Although in one way, the fact that these two superstar players are represented both by CAA also benefits the Canucks. And that's in the fact that, you know, Pettersson has to go first. Could you imagine if Hughes was represented by a different firm and was waiting on Pettersson? That would be a really awkward situation. So, you know, it's a double-edged sword, but the complication of the limited cap space and the fact that these negotiations are conjoined, I do think is making things harder. You know, it's harder to bridge the gap when every time you begin to build that bridge on one, you know, the shoreline changes on the other.
Yeah.
As for Hamonic, you know, it's a tough one to go through because you want to respect medical privacy, right? I mean, my primary outlet, The Athletic, we don't out players who's like, you know, whether it's a, you know, positive infection or whether or not it's their vaccine status, unless the player or the team confirms it expressly. And obviously that's not happening here. So, you know, how do you talk about that considering it? You know, I think we understand that this is complicated. And I think we understand, too, that it's about more than logistics. This is not Duncan Keith quarantining, right? There is conversations going on. And we know, too, in trying to square some of Jim Benning's public comments about Hamonic's status with his continued absence from training camp, that this is a fluid situation, something that's obviously evolving relatively quickly behind the scenes. You know, I'm not sure we're going to see 27 on the ice at training camp, right? No. And until I see that number, you know, I'm going to be skeptical that we're going to see that gap bridged while the Canucks are in Abbotsford.
Okay, Thomas, before I let you go, sticking with Travis Hamonic, would the Canucks have brought up, would they have talked to Travis Hamonic about his stance on vaccinations or what he feels about COVID before they agreed to a contract with him?
I mean, I don't know. And it's a big question, especially now, because there's no easy solutions here for either side, obviously. Otherwise, the solution would have been found. Yeah. But, yeah, I mean, you would have hoped that they would have had an understanding, especially because, you know, you look at a player like Tyler Bertuzzi, right, who's declined to get the vaccine in Detroit, and he's going to miss 9 games, right? It's going to cost him $500,000 almost to not be dosed. But when you're in Canada, like when you're a Canadian-based player, you're looking at 40-45% of your season, right? You're looking at $500,000 for every million you're due in terms of the lost income from, you know, declining to get vaccinated. I mean, that it's just a whole different beast in terms of your availability. And so, you know, yeah, I mean, the fact of the matter is that if they had a sense that a player was, you know, going to be reluctant to, you know, be vaccinated, I mean, as a Canadian team, the implications are just mammoth. And, you know, it is a matter of due diligence that certainly, if it wasn't performed, right, like it should have been.
Yeah. Thomas Drance Part 2 was at least as solid as Thomas Drance Part 1. Thanks for this, Thomas. All the best.
Anytime, gentlemen. See you, Coach.
There's your twin brother.